Ah, there you are. Yay.
Hi, Sandra.
So nice to see you, Molly. Thanks
You
for
too.
joining.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thanks everyone for joining wherever you are and in the future also when you maybe watch not live but later. So yeah, this is exciting. Um, if you don't already follow Hensel Pushers, make sure that you do. But let's just get started talking to Molly McCann, who's the brain and the energy behind the whole Hensel Pushers initiative. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted trying to figure out, is this Wi-Fi working well enough? I'm in a
I'm in the
different...
same boat. My Wi-Fi is also a little bit
Okay.
iffy, but
All
so
right.
far
Well,
so
we'll
good.
just do what we can. I'm in a different location than usual. If you've seen this before, you've never seen that artwork behind me. But anyway, here we are. So, Molly, let's just find out about you. First of all, like where you're from and your musical training and your non-musical training also.
Yeah. So I currently live in Oakland, California. I grew up in Southern California, and then I've been up here in the Bay Area for about 15 years now. I am primarily a pianist. I started playing piano when I was about 7 years old and was immediately just fell in love with it right away. And, never had any problem practicing or, pushing myself to do more. I, throughout high school, got really involved in music. I tried out a few other instruments. So I did, a little bit of violin and viola. For a minute, I tried some trumpet and alto saxophone. I remember like I kind of did a little bit of everything because I wanted to be a conductor. I worked with our school orchestra in high school. I did a lot of arranging
Oh,
for our orchestra. I did a little bit of composition. And then I directed the orchestra for my senior year of high school. And yeah, so I've
wow.
always just been very
Hopefully they
interested
paid
in,
you.
oh no, I got class credit. I got lots of class credit though.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um, yeah, no, it was, so I entered college thinking that I wanted to do music, and wanted to, make that my job. And I immediately didn't really like the culture of the music department there. I think it was a little bit competitive. It wasn't quite as, creative and about, learning and growth as as my experience had been in my own musical studies that were pretty self-guided. Although I had teachers, but I kind of directed my own learning for a long time. So I stepped away
Fantastic.
from music for a long time. Yeah, and then came back maybe about 5 years ago, started really playing piano seriously again, still only for fun, but I play every day. And then about 6 months ago, I picked up the flute because I love learning new things and new skills. So that's been my project this year to try to learn how to play the flute.
Wow. You never just sit and vegetate, it sounds like. You just always,
Not really, no.
wow, fantastic. What great energy. So, um, where did the interest in Fanny Hensel begin then?
Yeah, so growing up playing the piano and being involved in kind of the traditional music, classical music world, I was aware that Felix Mendelssohn had a sister, and I knew that she composed music, but I don't think I ever heard any of her music, and it never occurred to me as a 14, 15-year-old to seek it out and try to find it. I knew that she wrote a lot of lieder, which I wasn't, I'm not really in that world. So I kind of felt like it wasn't for me and just,
Mm.
moved on, not getting into any of her work. And then about 2 years ago, it was in November of 2019, um, uh, fantastic tweeting pianist Sharon Sue put out a really fantastic long thread of tweets about who Fanny Hensel was, about her work, and it was just hilarious and so amazing. And one of the tweets in there mentioned that Fanny Hensel wrote this giant cycle of piano music that was bigger than anything else written at the time, bigger than anything Felix wrote for the piano. And I was like, what is this? I need to find out more. And of course, that was Das Jahr. So I looked into Daciar and just fell in love with it. And that was kind of where my interest in Fanny Hensel really began, was about 2 years ago.
Wow. Thank you, Sharon Sue. Wow.
Yeah.
You never know where your tweets are going to land. That's fantastic. Um, so then how did you go from the Sharon Sue tweet and learning a little bit about Daciar to doing this huge Hensel Pushers project and etc.?
Yeah. Yeah. I so that was at the end of 2019, and I had been back into playing piano pretty seriously, pretty regularly for about 2 years at that point, and I was ready to like take on a big project and push myself to do something big with my piano playing. I had joined just a local meetup group that, we get together once a month to have a recital and a potluck, and it's a wonderful group of people.
Oh,
It's,
how fun.
yeah, musicians of all skill levels. Yeah, really
Brilliant.
fantastic group. Um, so I thought that, that group was the perfect venue for me to really push myself and try to do something more with my playing. And since we were at the end of 2019, I thought, there's this fantastic cycle that I've just learned about. I want to learn all of it. So why don't I just take the year 2020, and since there's a piece for every month, I'm going to learn a piece every month of the year. And it
Oh
was
my
really
God.
challenging. The piece is
Wow.
incredibly difficult to play. And I knew that I wasn't going to be
Yeah,
able to
big.
learn it to like a performance standard. But I just, I wanted to get comfortable sharing things that weren't perfectly polished, and
Good
just
for
really share
you.
with my
Yeah.
music group this piece of music. So that I started going through that. Um, I told my brother, who is incredibly supportive. He's a fantastic guy. His name is Sean McCann, and he runs a record label called Recital Records.
Oh,
I
nice.
told him about my project, and he bought me for Christmas that year a biography of Fanny Hensel. So I
Ah,
was reading the biography over the course of 2020 as I was learning Daciar. And there were a few, the biography, by the way, was by R. Larry Todd. It's called Fanny Hensel, the Other Mendelssohn. Highly recommend it if you're interested. It's very
okay.
well written.
Awesome.
And yeah, in that book, there was, it kind of talks about her works chronologically, and there's a point in it where um, he mentions a piece that she didn't finish, but that they found in her manuscripts, called The Northern Lights, and describes it as this really kind of ethereal, churning, high register 16th notes, lots of damper pedal, this very kind of
Wow.
atmospheric piece that sounded very experimental for the time. And
Yeah.
I scoured the internet trying to find it, and I couldn't find any. I think I found one mention of it in a German, one sentence in a German book somewhere. So I actually emailed the author of the book and said,
Hmm.
like, where is this? How could I find this? And he said, oh, it should be with all of her other manuscripts. You can see them online. And I didn't know that. So I checked it out. And there's links to all of this on henselpushers.org. So you can also find the manuscript. And I just looked through, and I was like, I had looked on IMSLP when I had first heard of her, or, in 2019, to see what was there. And there were a handful of pieces for solo piano, but not a whole lot. Um, and
Yeah.
I realized she wrote over 450 pieces of music, and most of those we have in her manuscript form, but they're not freely available to people. And a lot of musicians don't have a ton of extra cash to be spending on scores all the time. IMSLP is a wonderful
Right.
resource for me, and it's all in the
Yeah.
public domain because it's more than 150 years old. So I thought, so the first thing I did was I started to put together a score for the Northern Lights to make it just easy to read, because her handwriting is a little bit messy. These are just sketches for herself. She didn't think she would be showing these manuscripts
Right.
to anyone, so they're really hard to read. So I was like, I can just
Hmm.
clean this up. I used MuseScore, the software, so I was like, I can just clean this up and print it out for myself to practice at the piano. And then I started sharing it with a couple friends, and then I realized, like, why don't I just start putting all of these scores into MuseScore? So that's what I've been doing. So Hensel Pushers has a directory of all of her existing works. Every work that I can find a free PDF for online is linked on the website. Um, and yeah, and so you can go and check it out. And all of the scores that there are manuscripts of, but are not, uh, that aren't freely available in PDF form, I'll get around to them eventually. So I'm, yeah, putting those
Holy
together, and I
moly.
just want people to
Wow.
use them.
And is that just the piano music or everything that she wrote that you're working away
Yeah.
at?
So far, I have been working on the solo piano music, which is
Hmm.
about it's maybe a third of her total output.
Wow.
Um, I want to mention also Hensel Songs Online is a newly available resource by
Oh
Tim
yeah,
Parker
right.
Langston, who's a doctoral, I think he completed his doctorate recently in the UK. And for his doctoral project, he made transcriptions like I'm doing with Fanny Hensel's piano music. He did this for all of her lieder, which is about 250 pieces. So if you go to
Yeah,
henselsongsonline.org, you can
fantastic.
see all of his work. And he even provides some extra the pieces in alternative keys for different vocal ranges.
Right.
So that's another fantastic
Fantastic.
resource. So he's taken a lot of
Wow.
the work off my plate. And when he contacted me last year that he was going to do this, I was like, that's fantastic. We'll get through it so much faster. But yeah, for
Yeah.
next year, we are going to start branching out into chamber music and then probably also choral music, but we'll see where the timeline is on that.
Right. One thing at a time.
Yeah.
Wow. So exciting. Fanny, wherever her energy might be, she must be just like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Keep
think she'd be
going.
excited.
Keep going. So what is it about her that you obviously deeply connect with? Like, obviously she's great, but like specifically why Fanny?
I think part of it is that I really love the German early romantic piano music. I just like that style a lot. I really
Oh
like
yeah.
Felix's music
Yeah,
too.
me
I like
too.
just how it feels in my hands at the piano. So when I first learned, being a big fan of Felix's music, when I learned that there was this, a composer who in many ways is very similar to Felix, a lot of her music is similarly lyrical and beautiful, and hers is actually a little bit more innovative because she wasn't beholden to audiences and collaborators. She kind of just wrote what she wanted. So but there is a lot of similarity to Felix, so that was a big reason that I like it. And then I do think on some level I'm probably um, I think I'm compensating for a long time of just kind of the fact that I did know who she was and I just never thought to look into it. And now I
Hmm.
realize there's so much there. I mean, there's enough to spend a lifetime with just her music. So
Oh,
yeah,
indeed.
I love
You
it, and
you
yeah,
said there are 400 pieces?
yeah, almost four. She has 459 numbered works. So not all of
Okay.
those are completed, but about 450 of them are complete works.
Wow. And that's incredible. She lived to 40, how old was she when she died? 40 something.
42, 43. I don't remember off the top of my head,
Wow.
but yeah, early 40s.
Incredible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Sorry I interrupted you, but that those sound like good reasons, like to get there through Felix. Um,
Hmm.
but I noticed there was a comment on something I posted yesterday or today about Fanny. And then one of the comments was, "Wow, we hear references to her all the time, but we never actually hear her music."
Hmm.
And like, why do you think that is? Like, do you have any theories on why she's not?
I think, um,
I
and,
don't.
and you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think that the same thing happens with Fanny Hensel and Clara Schumann, where if you're brought up in this traditional, the traditional classical music training, which is not intensely critical of the canon and of the role of
Right,
gender and race in classical music, then the focus is always on Felix or Robert, right? And not on
right,
the women in their lives. So, in the process of learning about these great men, of these women, but the women are secondary. And there's just not, I think you need to bring up you need to critically, ask yourself, like, why are we not hearing about these women? Why don't I know these pieces? And something else
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about recently with Fanny Hensel, the fact that everything we're pulling from her canon, she wrote 450 pieces of music, but a lot of those pieces were things that she just jotted down in her notebook in an afternoon, right? A lot of the pieces
Right.
are not perfectly polished. They didn't go through a publisher. She didn't even sit back down and rethink them. So I don't blame
Right.
people
Right.
who might hear one of those pieces and go, it's a little simplistic. There's not a lot here, right? Because not everything everyone
Mm-hmm.
produces is like that, right? We're reading her diary of musical ideas, and she never intended for that to represent her as a
Right.
composer. So, I think it makes sense if people have that perspective. Now, the problem is that a lot of people will completely write off her music without even hearing any of it, because they assume that because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't heard any of her music, it's not worth hearing. And for
Didn't we
that
see a
reason,
little tweet thread about that recently?
yeah,
I
I think
think
so.
someone just kind of,
Yeah, right. Yeah, there was that guy on Twitter who was just like, well, if it was any good, and it's like, okay, you haven't thought about this. And then the other
yep.
thing that you and I were talking about recently is that, like, those people are not, we're not going to get to those people, right? The,
Right.
the dudes who come on here and go like, women buy music, like it's not worth paying attention to. It's inherently worse than, like, fine, continue believing that, go on, do your thing. The people who I want to reach are the people who might know of Fanny Hensel, right? And now that I think we're in a really good time for bringing back some of these historical women composers. And if people only know two historical women composers, it's probably going to be Fanny Mendelssohn, right? And Clara Schumann. And I think those are
Right.
going to be the entry points for a lot of people who are in that, like, traditional classical world and
Right.
want to learn more about women composers of history. So I want
Right.
to make that first step very easy and put out all of the, starting with the best works that I know of Fanny, and
Mm-hmm.
then eventually putting it all there. And then from there, hopefully, people will realize that there's a lot they've been missing, and they can go to your platform or, one of the other, many other people who are doing this great work, and learn about all of the other
Mm-hmm.
women composers who have been making great music for so long.
Right. Saint Molly. That's fantastic. That's so great. I would say, as I kind of mentioned to you recently, in one way, because Fanny Mendelssohn or Hensel, I tend to call her Fanny Hensel. I don't know if one way is right or wrong,
Who
but
knows?
Fanny Hensel and Clara Schumann, they both are, as you say, well known to us because of the men in their lives, the brother and the husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's great. We're aware of them. But I think in a way that also puts them in the shadow of those two guys. So
Yeah.
that's also perhaps part of what we, find as a bit of an obstruction in getting to know them themselves, or at least up until
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah. I
I
agree.
myself, when I started this En Pleine Lumière recording project, I began it in 2019, January. And that was my big epiphany of, like, wait a minute, there's all this music. I need to learn it, perform it, record it. And I chose to start that project with composers born in the mid 19th century. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually said, oh, well, early in the 19th century, you got Fanny and Clara, but they're fine. They don't need me.
Yeah, it's true.
But
I think
on the
so.
other hand, now I kind of wish, like, okay, maybe I need to do a prequel at some point.
You can always add a prequel.
Yeah. Okay, so now it's a 7-volume project. But the thing about Fanny's music as well, and I've just recorded the one piece by
Mm-hmm.
her. I don't think Erica's done one yet either. So we are low in our Fanny Hensel quota in piano music she wrote. I mean, we are busy. We got lots of
You're
music out
busy.
there. But one of the reasons one of the reasons for me is like this may not sound like a complicated piece, that one of the Mélodies, but I just found it really tricky. Like, I don't know what it was about it, but it's not easy music. And I probably
Yeah,
did choose one that was more doable for me in a short time than much of her other music. So that could
yeah,
also be part of the barrier. It's
yeah,
lots of stuff is really difficult,
yeah,
including Das Jahr,
yeah,
which
yeah,
leads us to the idea you're helping with that, with your Das Jahr publications. So,
yeah.
yeah, can you tell us all about that?
For sure. So, I the same, totally agree with everything you said. It's a lot of her music is incredibly difficult to play, takes a lot of, and it just for me, I just need to drill it for a very, very long time just to get it
Mm-hmm.
in my hands. Um, and you know, she clearly was a fantastic pianist. Records from the time indicate
Yeah,
that she was as skilled or more than Felix in terms of playing piano. And she played everything really fast. Like a lot of her music is very, very
yeah,
fast. Um, so when I spent 2020 learning Daciar, and I had friends and family kind of following along as I was doing it, just with me on social media, and and I had a few friends who were kind of casual pianists or hadn't played in a long time, who wanted to participate, and I said, oh, well, I think this should be more accessible. The melodies are so beautiful, kind of the styles of each of the months are so beautiful. So
yeah.
I decided to make a easier arrangement of it. I settled on kind of intermediate level, like, early to mid intermediate level. And it's a little bit progressive. So January is a little bit easier than the later months. So it gets a little
Oh,
bit more
cool.
challenging over the course of the year. But yeah, I created this, initially for some of the people that I know to have it be more accessible. And then after I had put together the arrangements of each of the pieces, I realized like a lot of piano technique can be learned or can be taught through these pieces
Mm,
because,
fantastic.
one like February has a chromatic scale. You can learn the chromatic scale fingering that way, right? And there's a lot of rolled chords
Right.
in December. Good way to learn that. There's arpeggios,
Oh,
especially in like the spring songs. There's, you learn how to use the damper pedal and clear it efficiently in September. So I was like, you can learn a lot about the basic techniques of piano, above the,
right,
it's not like five finger patterns and like dynamics. And that's like the very, beginner level, but that, getting from there to the intermediate level, there's a lot you
right.
can learn through this. Then I decided that there should be another book to, it functions as a lesson book basically. So for each of the pieces, in the arrangement, there's a lesson in the lesson book, and it kind of, explains the musical terms and symbols that are in the piece. It talks about the structure of the piece, the flow of the piece, and then there's some exercises for whatever that specific technique is, of focus in that piece. And there's, I think, about roughly 3 exercises per piece.
Wow,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and then a little bit of like reflection. My favorite part of learning a piece was always kind of trying to understand, what's the story of this piece, or what's the feeling of this piece, and how can I connect it to my life or my experiences. So at the end of every piece, there's or of every
Mm,
lesson, there's some ideas for that kind of reflection. What's the story here? What's the feeling? How can you communicate that feeling? And kind of tying together this idea of
beautiful.
performance and technique
And imagination.
and
Wow,
imagination. Absolutely.
fantastic. I can't wait to get my copies. Um, and where do people get their copies? Pencil pushers
Yeah,
dot.
henselpushers.org. You can order
Yeah.
it there. Uh, Unfortunately, they're not going to make it to people by Christmas because things are a little bit hectic right now with shipping, but they will be shipped out
Yeah.
before the end of the year, probably at the end of this month.
Yeah. Fantastic. Along with similar dates for the piano music she wrote anthologies. Yeah, so
Yes.
you guys, you got a lot of stuff you got to buy coming up. Um, I think this is so great that that you've taken that humongous magnum opus and made it accessible to pianists of that level. That's fantastic. Can't wait to hear and read. And oh my gosh. Um, I was just going to ask you, just by the way, about this controversy about the image of Fanny Hensel. That, yeah, can you talk about that? Because we just have to clear that up for once
There's an
and for all.
imposter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I knew you were going to ask about this, so I brought some visual aids so people know what we're talking about. So
Okay,
you may have
fantastic.
seen this picture of, I think that I'm backwards in the mirror vision, but you can see.
It
So this
might
is
be,
not Fanny
yeah, that's
Hensel.
fine.
And if you Google, until recently, if you Googled Fanny Hensel or Fanny Mendelssohn, this lady would show up. This is Felix's wife. Her name is Cecile Mendelssohn. And it might be confusing because Fanny's middle name is Cecile. So she was born Fanny Cecile Mendelssohn. And then this was Cecile Jean Renaud, who became Cecile Mendelssohn when she married Felix. And then I checked today, by the way, and it was better than the number 1, 2, 3, 4 images that came up today. This is Fanny. This is who showed up on
okay.
our on
Excellent.
Google for me today. So it is getting better, but there's a really excellent article out there by Marion Wilson Kimber called "Google Does It Again" about this mix-up between these two images. So hopefully that
fantastic.
helps. They've got similar kind of hairstyles.
So just noticing the ringlets is not enough.
Not enough.
The other one has ringlets as well.
They both have the ringlets. Yeah.
I also brought a visual aid. This is from your beautiful website, and this is the real woman. Again, backwards. Sorry, but
yeah. That illustration and a lot of illustrations that we have of Fanny Hensel are by her husband, Wilhelm Hensel, who was an artist. So there's a lot of really fantastic sketches of her.
Beautiful.
That's usually what you see, other than the one oil painting of her. That's what you usually see. And those are all lovingly created by her husband, Wilhelm.
Oh, they had a real cool thing going on there with real creative life together.
Yeah, they were both interested in poetry. Wilhelm was also a poet. He wrote some poems that Fanny, of her leader, have lyrics by him. And then, of course, Daciar, the manuscript, which you can also see on henselpushers.org. The first page of every month in Daciar is illustrated by Wilhelm Hensel. So there's my favorite one probably is, well, I like January a lot. January's subtitle is A Dream, and it's this kind of lady laying back on a couch, relaxing, like having a dream. But then also September is called At the River. So it's a very beautiful illustration of a woman sitting by a river. She's got her toes in the flowing water. So these, the illustrations really help bring character to the songs. And then before each of the pieces, there's an excerpt of poetry that Fanny and Wilhelm selected together to kind of introduce each piece. So it was really ahead of its time, and this collaborative multimedia artwork. So that's just more about what an incredible ahead of its time piece it was.
Yeah, exactly. I love also that first page of each month is a different color. It's like a some of a pastel colored paper. Each one a different color.
Yeah.
So great. So, you were talking about, and I think I interrupted you, about your group that you were performing 1 month at a time. So the thing is, 2020, how did that work out?
Yeah.
Like you,
not great if you were around in 2020. So we started, I started this project in January. So for our January and February concerts, we had it in person like usual. And yeah, got to share together. And then starting in March, we have a lot of people who are, really driven to keep the group together and going every month, and a lot of very kind of tech savvy people who had used, when everyone was just getting used to Zoom and using Zoom for music in March of 2020, we had a number of people in our group who are already familiar with how that worked. And so we jumped right away to Zoom meetings and spent last year doing all of our meetings via Zoom. And then just in the last month or two, we've started getting together in small hybrid get-togethers. So we'll have 4, 5, 6 people getting together in person, safely vaccinated, COVID tests, very carefully. And then the people who are either not comfortable or who just, maybe they live far away, can still attend online via Zoom. So right now we have this kind of hybrid solution, which I really have to say, I just love this group because everyone is really interested in making sure that we're accommodating everyone's needs and making everyone feel welcome and comfortable, and inviting everyone to participate to whatever level that they're interested in. So I'm really thankful for that group. Yeah, just as an outlet
Plus
for
potluck meals.
plus potluck.
I mean,
yeah.
Motivation to
Absolutely.
not do it virtually.
Yes.
So I hope that you've probably thought of this already, but I'm just going to give you an idea that all those people in that group, hopefully, well, the pianists, they're going to buy your Dacier book, and then 2022, each person is going to play one of the months.
They have no excuse because there are some very talented pianists in that
There you
group.
go.
So I'll see if I can get that to happen.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, if any of them are watching, make that happen. So other than Dacier, what do you have some other faves? You mentioned that Northern Lights, although that's not a full, it's more of a sketch.
Yeah,
There's some other
that one's
favorite
just a sketch.
pieces of hers.
Yeah, I love her chamber music. She doesn't have a ton of chamber music. She has a few violin and piano, cello and piano pieces. She has one piano trio, which is incredible. She wrote that in the last year of her life, so it's one of her more mature works in terms of structure and form and ideas. And then she has an early piano quartet that she wrote in, I think, her early 20s, late teens, something like that. So it has a much more classical flavor to it, but fantastic also. And then she wrote a string quartet kind of right in the middle there in her early 30s or so. And that also gets some play. So if you've heard any of her chamber music, it's probably the string quartet or the piano trio. I really love both of those. And then so much of her piano music is incredible. I think my favorite piece, mostly because it's an incredible piece, and I think that more serious pianists should know it. And it's on the website. It's on henselpushers.org. You can download the score for free. It's H391. Most of her pieces don't have names, so it's like piano piece. It's Allegro agitato, G minor. It's an incredible piece. Honestly, I think it rivals Beethoven sonata opening movements in terms of what it has to say and just the character of it. It's recapitulation. 2 of the 3 themes are switched, so you can see she's like experimenting. And this is something that it wasn't until later in the Romantic era that a lot of pianists really started shaking that up like that. So very ahead of its time. And this was about 6 months. She wrote this about 6 months before she wrote her G minor piano sonata, which is one of her most famous pieces. If you know any of her big piano pieces, it's probably the G minor sonata. And so she wrote this a few months before. And I think it's probably, this was the first attempt at that sonata, because it starts with the same 3-note melody, 2 quarter notes and a half note descending, to G. So it clearly is built on the same idea. And I definitely like the first movement of the G minor piano sonata, but I think that this one is just totally incredible. It should be used in
Wow.
piano competitions.
Fantastic.
Everyone should know about this piece. So all of the
Okay.
pianists I know, I've been telling them about this, hoping that someone who is more talented than me will get out there and record it so that we can hear it.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't
I
know
mean,
of
I
any
personally,
recordings of it right now.
um,
So
well, that's going to change any minute now after this Instagram Live.
yeah,
I've had
Erica's gonna record it.
do it. You know what? She's probably already learned it in the 3 minutes that we've talked about it. Knowing Erica, bump, bump, done. Um, so I was just going to say, I've played some of her songs, and I think they're, I mean, she's a major leader composer, and yet, oh yeah, we should do something by a woman. Oh, what about those songs by Fanny Hensel? No, no, she's a major leader composer.
Yeah, yeah.
So major.
And her
So,
piano score, I don't know a lot of her leader, but I have actually started learning some of them on my flute. I told you I'm trying to learn how to play the flute, so I've been taking up
right.
trying to learn some of her pieces on the flute. And the piano accompaniment in these leader is serious. Like I wonder if that's
Yeah.
part of the reason that they're not played more, is that this is, as challenging as her solo piano music is,
Mm,
her leader accompaniment is maybe not equally challenging, but more than
yeah.
a
Not
typical
quite as challenging,
accompanist.
but
Yeah,
yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Typical accompanist. Now. We mustn't just typical
Collaborative
accompanist.
pianist. Sorry.
Myself being one of them. Um, my split of solo pianist and pianist for singers. So yeah, I'm gonna just be careful about that one.
Yeah.
But what do you have in mind next? Like, where do you see Hensel Pushers moving ahead in a year or two? Or like, you'll be, I guess, just continuing. You still have quite a
Hmm.
few works that you want to put into
Yeah.
what's it called? Muse score?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So continuing with the PDFs, that's like the main project. And I'm just doing that on an ongoing basis, putting those up. And I try to go through and select pieces, usually between 10, 15-ish pieces at a time, that kind of they're coherent in some way. They're either from a
Mm,
similar period of her life, or her creative output, or on a similar theme, or of a similar level or something. So I try to create them in albums, just because otherwise it's impossible to navigate
nice.
all of them. So we're going to continue putting those out. There's a couple that are half finished right now, and those will be coming up at some point next year. We also have a YouTube channel, and it's not nearly
Right.
as wonderful as your YouTube channel, where we have live performances of beautiful music. Mine is just the MIDI output of the songs, that comes out of the software, but it's better than nothing. And most of these pieces have never been recorded. So I want pianists to at least be able to listen, to kind of get the feel of it. So
Right.
our most recent few batches of, out groups of pieces that have been released, have those are already on YouTube. I'm going to go back, and all of our like back catalog that I released over the last year or so that haven't been put on YouTube, those are going to be on YouTube next year. And then,
Great.
yeah, we're going to branch out into chamber music, and maybe have some live performances of those chamber musics. We're still trying to figure out how to do that. And then,
Great.
yeah, just several people have reached out especially over the last 6 months or so, and trying to find ways to collaborate. So there's a lot of things that are still pretty nebulous, but
Nice. Yeah.
are, slowly coming together.
Lots of juice towards more and more
Yeah,
projects.
yeah.
Um, this was just a question that just occurred to me. Uh, in my experience of playing so much music composed by women now, uh, it's a very, very high percentage of scores that have some errors in them. Published
Yeah.
published scores Usually I think
Yeah.
it must be because they were only published once.
Yeah.
Um, so was any of her music published more than once? And like, have you noticed in the stuff that was published before
Mhm.
Hensel Pushers came along, have you noticed that issue? Um,
Yeah. So there are, so only a few of her pieces were published during her lifetime, right? In the last year of
yeah.
her life is when she started publishing things. And most of
Oh,
it was
only.
older things that
Wow.
she had written, yeah, decades earlier. So most of the publications we have from that time, I think those are okay because she was involved in the publishing of many of those and the preparation that,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
many of the opuses came out after her death, but were prepared, you know, she was involved in preparing them. So I actually don't know about those. I would, but for that reason, I would trust those a little bit more.
Right.
Um, I know there have been a couple pieces that I transcribed for Hensel Pushers because they weren't available, you know, for free as PDFs. And then, you know, later either like got as a gift, you know, a book of scores that it included one of those pieces. And then when I compare them, there are differences between what I found and what they found. And I totally understand where
Hmm.
those challenges come from because, like I said, a lot of these manuscripts are very messy. They were just ideas that she
Yeah.
jotted down. You know, a lot of the times
Right.
she'll forget. You know, she'll write it in one key signature and then go back and revise it and change the key signature and then not remember to change like the corresponding accidentals in the music. Right. So some of it you do kind of have to
Did she
interpret.
not
Like,
take Did she not
I
take some
mean.
theory lessons? She should have known better than that.
I mean, she knows what's going on. She just
Yeah, of
she goes so fast
course.
through it that
Right.
all of these little things get overlooked. So there are
Yeah.
definitely areas where it's
Right.
not clear what she intended, and I
Mm.
put you know, I interpret it the best that I can for
Right.
the edition. Something else that I would love to do if I had more bandwidth would be to, you know, with every piece that I upload, to list, you know, a complete list of all of my notes about like, I'm not sure about measure 32 on the
Oh,
second
yeah,
beat.
yeah,
Should this
yeah.
be a natural or a flat, right? Like I have those notes and I keep those, you know, in a very messy form as I'm going through and producing these. But my priority right
Okay.
now is just to put the scores
Get it
out
out.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a number of people who have emailed me through the website because they're using the scores and they'll point out things that like, I think this is, she probably meant for this to be, and it's
Okay.
usually not an error in the transcription, but it's an error in, you know, she changed clefs and didn't make a note, and because it looks like it's a third lower than it was because she, you know, didn't change it from bass clef to treble clef or
Right.
something like that. So um and that's part of
Right.
what I love about this project and the fact that it is digital is that I love it when I get those emails from people and we usually, you know, go back and forth emailing with each other being like, oh, well, could she have meant this? What about this? Kind of looking at different interpretations. And, you know, occasionally I'll revise what's there based on those conversations. And, you know, sometimes we walk away from that where I go, I think it's probably this. And then the performer who I've been talking with goes, I think it's probably this other way. And my answer is always, do what you think it is, because
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm right. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I like that this whole project can exist online and I can update those scores and we can have these conversations about it.
Right. Ah, musicology in real time. That's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. Ah, um, so obviously we've mentioned the website a few times and it's beautiful and it's got so much and free. Um, Dossier, the books, of course,
Mm-hmm.
you need to pay for those, and still, it's a great deal. So we
Mm-hmm.
find you there, henselpushers.org,
Mm-hmm.
here on Instagram at henselpushers.
Hensel Pushers, uh-huh, and on Twitter at Hensel Pushers and on YouTube at Hensel Pushers.
You make it quite easy for people. Just Hensel Pushers. Do you want to tell where the
Everywhere.
idea for that name came? Where the idea
That
to call it
was
Pushers?
I mean, obviously
You
it
don't
was
have
done
to
on
tell.
pencil
You don't.
pushers. No, I mean, and I
Uh-huh.
have to give credit to my husband for that. That was his idea. You know,
Oh,
he offers a lot of moral support, but this was his contribution to the project. Was I was like, what do
oh,
we call it? And you know, Fanny fans, that's kind of silly, and I don't know. And he's like, I know,
Mm.
Hensel pushers. So he gets credit for that one.
Yay. I must say, I didn't actually think about the pencil pushers. I was just picturing it because Fanny Hensel's music is like better than drugs, that
Yes,
you're
that too.
pushing the music on us.
Yes,
That's what
I
I
am
was
a
thinking.
Fanny Hensel pusher.
Yeah. And so should we all be. So, is there anything else you wanted to bring out about this work that we haven't mentioned yet?
Um, no, just well, I wanted to first of all thank you and Erica for your work with Piano Music She Wrote. I know you guys were kind of spooling up at the same time that I was, and I was watching you do that on Twitter, and you know your project of recording these works so that pianists and piano students could listen to them. That was, you know, initially that was part of what I wanted to do, but I'm really more of a researcher than a pianist. And I knew that I wouldn't be able, you know, working full time, I knew I wouldn't be able to record all of these pieces at the rate that would need to happen. So just, I've taken so much inspiration from you and Erica and what you're doing,
Oh,
and huge, I love what you're doing. And there's a lot of people, like you have to find us, but there's a lot of people out there in Twitter and, you know, in the kind of niche historical female composers world that are doing really, really great things. Who
yeah,
else comes to mind? Sarah Fritz, who's like the number one Clara Schumann
yeah,
stan on Twitter, is an inspiration.
yes.
And
She's brilliant.
Dr. Samantha Ege and her work on Florence Price and reconstructing her fantasies,
Yeah,
and that, I mean, I'm just, she's an incredible pianist. She is my hero as a pianist researcher. And then yeah, just a lot of fantastic people doing things like this out there. Oh, and the other person I wanted to mention was Angela Mace Christian, who it was, if you don't know about Fanny's Easter Sonata, I'll put a post up about it sometime, but it was a piece that was thought to be lost. And then later they thought it was a piece by Felix, and they thought it was lost. And then they found a recording of it from like the 70s, and it was the Easter Sonata by Felix. But there wasn't any mention of this in the historical record, but there was a mention of an Easter Sonata in Fanny's journal. So there was kind of this
oh,
mystery around it for a long time. And Angela Mace Christian was another musicologist. She tracked down this manuscript, which was in private ownership in France somewhere, and
wow.
transcribed it
Oh my
from, you know,
gosh.
by hand from the manuscript, and then as I think as her dissertation or something, put that together. And it's there on her website if you search for Angela Mace Christian Easter Sonata. The score there is
Okay.
there for free on her website. So she was also a big inspiration for me as I was learning about that. I was like, I love what she's doing. You know, she acknowledges this is a
Wow.
ton of work, but what's important is that people know and play this music. So um,
Fantastic.
yeah, so there's a number of incredible people doing this kind of work out there, and I'm
Thank
inspired
God.
by everyone who's doing it. And yeah, and
Also.
everyone here is so driven by their passion and their interest. And
Hmm.
you know, I am outside of the formal music world, and I like it because that allows me to just do what I'm interested in and what I think there's a need for, and really do things creatively. And I love to see, yeah, researchers and individuals who are just passionate about things come up with their own projects. And like, I imagine, like, what would music look like if everyone was empowered to follow
Hmm.
these kinds of projects and share it with other people, you know, in the music community. So
Yeah.
yeah, I draw a lot of inspiration from
Empowered
everyone who does
and
that.
empowered and financially supported, because a lot of us are
Yeah,
just doing
yeah,
it in our, yeah.
yeah.
So
So donate
thank
to all of
goodness
those
that you,
people and purchase their
yeah,
products and support them financially so
yeah.
they can continue doing these things. Yes.
I think it's really important. Yeah. And buy recordings. Don't just stream blah blah blah. Just buy music, buy
Mm-hmm.
scores, buy recordings. Um, so it's so fantastic what you're doing, and it just keeps growing and growing. And it's like, speaking of inspiration, it's fantastic. So thank you so much, Molly. And
Thank you,
I just
Sandra.
want to say thank you to everyone who's joined in to listen and will do so in the future. Um, we probably won't have a Friday Instagram live chat for a few weeks because of the holidays, but I think beginning right away in January again, I have lots of ideas for people that will be invited to come and chat again. And there's Erica saying, thank you, Molly. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Erica,
Thank
for being
you.
here. And
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, so thank you again to everyone, and we'll meet in this forum again in January.
Great. Thank you, Sandra.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
okay, take care.